It gives me great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Mr. Bob Craven, a veteran of World War II. Mr. Craven was born and raised in Chicago and was drafted into the U.S. Army at the age of 18. During World War II, he served as a combat infantryman from 1944 until the war ended in 1945. He served in the European Theater of Operations with the 99th Division and the 394th Infantry Regiment, including duty in France, Belgium, and Germany. He is a veteran of the Battle of the Bulge. He finished his service as a private first class, and he is a recipient of the Purple Heart and Bronze Star. He is a resident of Crestwood and was married to his wife, Dorothy, for 64 years until her passing last year. He has 2 children, 5 grandchildren, and 9 great-grandchildren. Thank you, Mr. Craven, for taking the time to address our District 218 cadets this evening. You can applaud.
The story I'm about to tell you describes an incident that took place nearly 75 years ago during World War II. It's not a story about the gory part of the war, but it is a story but for me held terror. The bloody part would come later. It was the first time in my life that I experienced abject fear. And I didn't experience again until much, much later. I took to the rigors of Army training with little difficulty. I was a physical kind of a guy. I enjoyed what I was doing, and I was somewhat of an oddball, that I had loved. I loved to march. The military became an integral part of my life, and I even enjoyed standing retreat. There was something very special about the lowering of the flag ceremony at the end of the day. I was a member of the 394th Infantry, the 99th Division. We finished our advanced training at Camp Maxey, Texas, and left there in the summer of 1944 and went to a POE, Fort Miles Standish in Massachusetts, where we boarded a troop ship. And headed for Europe by the way of the North Atlantic. My home for the next 12 days was the USS Explorer. We were part of a huge convoy. The convoy consisted of cargo ships, supply ships, and Navy warships of every type and description. The USS Explorer was what we called a Liberty ship. They were manufactured by the thousands, put out by the thousands during World War II. And they were put together with glue and tinfoil. They were not designed for comfort. Our quarters aboard the ship were something to be desired. We were, of course, below deck. And our quarters reminded me of a giant sardine can. And we were the sardines. After a few days at sea, our quarters became a little gamey. I won't go into that aspect of it. But we encountered rough seas and had to remain below deck for the first 3 days. On the 5th or 6th day, the weather cleared, and those of us that were able were allowed to go topside or up on deck. What a treat. The salt air was crisp, clean, and we became alive again. We started to horse around, telling jokes, fun stories. Suddenly, and without warning, the PA system of the ship came alive. I believe the sailors called it the squawk box. And it blared out and rattled our brains. This is your captain. This is your captain. Now hear this. Will the sailors along the port side of the ship line up along the rail, and when you see a torpedo, sing out. He didn't say if you see a torpedo. He said when you see a torpedo. We all went silent. No one spoke. The only sound was the sound of the muffled sound of the ship's engines and the sound of the sea. We've all been in stressful situations, and you as young people, you've been in stressful situations. Exams, deadlines, and even in a few instances, going out of your comfort zone. But the stress that I felt that day was something almost indescribable. It was extreme, and you know, under that kind of stress, you become quite confused. You begin to, it begins to play on your mind, and you try to rationalize what you heard and what is taking place, but you come up with the wrong answers, as I did. I was a young guy, I was 18 years old. I said, this is nothing more than an Army ruse. What it is another exercise. We ran into time and time again in training. It was nothing more than an exercise to keep us sharp and alert. But then how could I explain those 2 destroyer escorts out in the distance? And the depth charges going over the fantails. They're moving about in patterns. This was no dry run. I remember feeling anger because the troop ships were in the center of the convoy. And they were to be protected. We were an Army unit in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean with arms of every type and description, and we were totally helpless. There we were, stomachs churning, seeing phantom torpedoes that existed only in our minds, and waiting for the appearance of a real one. I don't recall or remember how long the alert lasted, but it seemed like an eternity before that all clear was finally sounded. We later learned that a German submarine had actually penetrated the convoy, but that was all the information we were given. I always had respect for my fellow servicemen. And my respect increased dramatically that day, especially for the guys out there on those destroyers. Wow, that's all I could say, that's all I could think of. I returned to the United States in March of 1945 aboard the USS John J. Meany, a hospital ship. I had mixed emotions, but my love of country was still intact. And that love over the 93 years that I have lived has only grown. I realized that today as a nation we face many problems. We've made mistakes, and I suspect that we're going to make more. But we still live in the greatest country in the world, bar none. You young ladies and gentlemen here tonight are a vital part, a very vital part of this country's future. You're going to meet many challenges. You're going to face many challenges. And some of these challenges will be quite great. And there may be times when you will have to rely on more than just self-reliance. I would encourage you, from my heart of hearts, to remember your heritage. Your heritage is freedom. Never, never relinquish it. And never show respect to your country's magnificent symbol, the American flag.